Hello, this is my presentation on students taking responsibility of their learning through digital data tracking. Alright, so ISTE stands for the International Society for Technology in Education, and they have published a set of standards for both teachers and students. So there's a set for teachers and a set for students. One of the very first ones that they have listed for students is to be an empowered learner. And these standards are just guidelines for technology in the classroom. So with this standard, empowered learner, it says that students leverage technology to take an active role in choosing, achieving, and demonstrating competency in their learning goals informed by their learning sciences. This standard is all about the students taking control of their learning and making it their own and being very personal with the learning process. This standard is met by 4 indicators listed below here. The first one is that students articulate and set personal learning goals, develop strategies leveraging technology to achieve them, and reflect on the learning process itself to improve learning outcomes. Now, these learning goals are different than the learning targets that the teacher presents to the whole class. These are specific goals for that student. So an example could be that this student hopes to achieve 80% of their multiplication facts by next week. So these goals are something that are very specific to that student. It's not an overall class goal, but something that that student is able to achieve. The second indicator is that students build networks and customize their learning environments in ways that support the learning process. So what this is saying is that students are able to cater their learning process to meet that specific goal that we were talking about in this first indicator. So they can come up with a plan to achieve their personal goals and create that learning process for themselves. So the third indicator says students use technology to seek feedback that informs and improves their practice to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways. So there's so many different ways that teachers can provide feedback for students, and technology just gives us so much more ways to give feedback. It makes giving feedback a lot easier and simpler. So technology in ways for giving feedback, also using technology to demonstrate their learning. So there's so much that we can do with technology, and we can also use it to have students demonstrate what they do know. And the last indicator says students understand the fundamental concepts of technology operations, demonstrate the ability to choose, use and troubleshoot current technologies, and are able to transfer their knowledge to explore emerging technologies. So I think one of the most important things in that indicator is the ability to choose. So being able to have that choice and make things their own is really what empowers that learner. According to Gerstein, there are 4 dimensions of learner empowerment. So there are 4 different things that play into the roles of empowering a student. The first one is making it meaningful. So the value of the task must hold some form of importance and value based on one's personal beliefs and experiences. Once that task has meaning towards that student, they feel all the more reason to complete that task. The second one is confidence. So having confidence that they're able to complete that task empowers that student. If they know that they can attain that goal, if they know they can work hard to reach that goal, it's not some crazy out of the loop goal, they feel more empowered to complete that task. The third one is impact. So knowing that a certain task is being done to create a positive, lasting effect creates motivation that empowers individuals. If you know that what you are doing has a purpose and is being done to make things better, there is more motivation to complete that, and it does empower the student even more. And the last one we have is choice. And I just mentioned this in the last indicator for the standard. Having a say in what is being done, adding your personal opinions and preferences, empowers an individual to want to achieve that task. So with this presentation, I am going to take this standard and explain how students can use data tracking through technology and using the internet to empower their own learning. So I wanted to do some research on the importance of students tracking their own data. And what I found was that when students are tracking and monitoring their own progress, they begin to take ownership of their learning. I have listed some of the most important things that researchers have found after students have been tracking their own data and creating that conversation with the teachers on their personal goals and what they can do to achieve that goal. So the first thing is that having students track their own data and progress allows them to monitor their achievement towards specific learning goals, creates powerful discussions between themselves and their teacher, and provides better communication with parents. So students are able to see their own progress. They're able to see the areas where they need more help in, or they need to work on more to get to their goals. So having them track their own data just gives them that power to see that, rather than just the teacher tracking it and the teacher knows where they're at, but the student doesn't really know what's going on. So it gives them that power. It makes the discussions between the teacher and themselves so much more powerful. The discussions allow the student to just vocalize what kind of things need to be done to reach their goal. What kind of progress have we made? What are some good things that have come from our progress so far? So it really deepens that discussion. So our second thing, students are able to see where they stand over time and set specific goals for themselves. Kind of related to that last one, but this allows students to set their own goals rather than the teacher saying, I want you to be here by this time. The student can now see how they're progressing, and they can see the rate at which they're progressing and kind of determine on their own what kind of goals they can achieve by a certain time. The next one is when their own progress is tracked, students begin to change their mindset from intelligence is fixed to believing they have the power to grow with their own effort. This is a big thing that's happening in schools now. We're switching from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and being able to track your own progress only allows for that even more to happen. It's no longer, I was never good at math, or it just isn't for me. It's now that they see what they can achieve, they can set those goals, and they know that they can make it to that goal because they're seeing their own progress and being able to track it themselves. All right, and our last one, we have when implemented correctly, students' own data tracking can also improve skills that are tied to the Common Core state standards, such as improvement with making evidence-based claims, engagement in error or success analysis, and developing independence and self-direction. And I think this last point is huge. When they are tracking their own data, they have those conversations with their teacher, and the teacher can ask, how do you know that you have met this, or how do you feel about reaching this goal? And students can use, or they can improve their evidence-based claims by saying, well, I know I got this grade on this assignment, and the feedback from my teacher, I just showed myself that I can do it. So they're able to go back and look at their work and tell themselves that they completed it rather than just seeing a grade from the teacher and saying, okay, the teacher gave me an A, I must know it. They are able to go back and specifically point out how they know that. So that also goes along with the error success analysis. They're able to talk about where they went wrong, what they can do differently, what did go well. And then the last part we said was developing independence and self-direction. And I think that is a huge skill that isn't always taught indirectly. So the development of that independence and having those students being able to see their own progress is something that they will take on with them through the rest of their life, being able to keep on with their goals and keep setting plans to meet that goal. All right, so I came up with a way to use data tracking through Google Sheets. So my students have Chromebooks where they're able to get on and look at their Google Drive and any documents in there. This works fine if your school has a computer lab. So Google Sheets is a part of the Google Drive, and it allows for the creation of a multi-page spreadsheet that can be shared to anyone with a Google account. So I do have one created down here, and I will show you that in a minute. And what I would plan to do is that I would share that with all of my students. They would need to make their own copy and save it in their drive. But as we go through our graded assignments, or as I sit down with them individually and track their progress and we talk about how they're doing, we would be able to pull this up on their computers and talk about their progress. And having it on a Google account is so much helpful than making so many copies of papers and putting them into these binders, giving them to the students. Students might lose the binders, papers fall out of the binders, and it creates a huge mess. The technology piece using the online Google Sheets just cleans it up and makes it so much easier to use. So I wanted to show this video really quick of a young student who has her data tracking all on Google Sheets, and she kind of explains what's going on there. She doesn't really get much into the detail and discussion of what the charts mean, but she does show good examples of a data tracking notebook.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming.
And we are going to jump ahead right about here.
Okay, here's my star rating. I've kind of put a goal and then my score on there, and as well as star math, same thing. I put a graph.
I kind of like that because it seems much easier to record your data this way.
It's probably much neater than coloring it in.
Yeah. It's easier to have all of your data in one place so you can just pull up. So what's this?
This is my quality student. I took 2 pictures and drew it. I did one of me and one I just kind of drew from scratch. I put out things I think of what a quality student is. This first one, I put kind, caring, patient, flexible, and this one is me, and I put other words of what I think a quality student would look like.
That's cool. And okay, what is this?
This is CCR. It stands for Common Core Review. I have put a chart there, and it's basically we're doing math review, and I've graphed all my scores and and how many I could have gotten for possible points.
So that was just a quick example. She's showing you on her Google Sheets, she has these different tabs along the bottom, and they all mean different things. So then some of them, she had her data and her information, her grades from different assignments, and a graph would show up showing her visually how she met her goals or if she was short of meeting her goals. So it provides visual examples for those students to see their progress. And this example also had other pages like Shatter Quality Student page, which can also be included in digital data tracking. This is one that I have created, very similar to what we saw in the video. So the cover page, I just have them fill out their name, their favorites, and what they like most about math, least about math. I would use this with my math class specifically. So then down here I have the different tabs, and I organized it by the Common Core band. So the math standards are banded into operations and algebraic thinking, numbers and operations, and in them I have different standards. So quickly I'll go through the first tab is their STAR math scores. So they will keep track of their STAR scores. I have them take it monthly, and as they put in data, I put in some example data, their graph adapts to the data they're putting in. So as they're putting in the data, they can see their line growth, and this allows for discussions. How do you know that you're improving? How does that graph show that? And they can explain, well, if the line is going up, I know that I'm improving my score. The first band of standards is operation and algebraic thinking. So over here, I listed the standards, and I don't have the numbers exactly lined up with the standard numbers. I know there's like OA, A2, and OAB, and I don't do that because I think this is easier for students to see if I just number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just numbered them normally. But I started and I put them in the order that I would teach them. So I would teach these 3 standards, and down here are the dates that I track their progress. So let's say on August 29th, I tracked their progress, and this student was able to successfully meet this standard and this standard. And I wrote these standards in the I can statements, which are worded for students. They're not exactly worded like the standards. But this student met these 2 standards but did not meet this standard. So then a week later I track them, and now the student can meet all 3 standards. And once again I track him again, and he's still meeting those standards, so that tells me that he's doing good. Now, the standards aren't always taught directly in order. So I might teach these 3 at the beginning of the year, come back, and then teach these 3 later on. So that's why there's a big gap in these dates. So he already was able to complete these 3 standards back in September. So now we're working on these 3 standards, and the first data tracking, he only met the first one. Come back a week later, and he now met all of the standards for this math band in the Common Core. I also provided space down at the bottom for notes when we are meeting individually and discussing his progress. So some examples, I might inform him, or we might decide together, maybe he's able to realize this on his own, that he is reaching a level 3, which is, we use standards-based rating. So we use 1, 2, 3, 4 scores. So he might be at a level 3 for standard OA2 at this day. So we make a goal. If I practice and take my time, I can make sure I use the correct operation symbols to receive a 4. So we set a plan for him, and he was able to achieve that by the next week. And that's kind of how the rest of the math standards would look like in these tabs. So that would be a great way to use a digital tracking notebook. And then this last video is an example of how this teacher discusses this student's data. Now they used actual binders, it's not digital, but it shows a good way that our discussion could be held as we're discussing their student's progress. And I am going to pause this and jump ahead right about here would be good.
For letter sounds, here's what hers looks like. So again, you'll see, I don't know if you see this here, but I kind of marked off with her about where it is that she needs to be for a certain 9 weeks. Because we were discussing here about how she needed to be here for this first 9 weeks, and then this was her second 9 weeks. I went through and we charted her progress. Now, something else that you'll notice is in the very beginning, I actually had her color in where she was and the ones that she got correct. I don't do that anymore because it takes way too much time. It takes up way too much instruction time. So now I color it in for them. And then I have them tell me what it is, the meaning of what it is that I just did. So they have to be able to say, well, you colored in all 26 letters. That means that I know all of my uppercase letter sounds because all of those are colored in. So they have to be able to tell me about their learning, even though I'm the one that's doing all the coloring.
So I like that she said they have to be able to tell me about their learning. And that's the key importance of the data tracking, that the students need to be able to talk about their learning and talk about their progress and understand what it all means. So that would happen through our digital data tracking notebooks that we can use to communicate with. So that is everything. I have my references right here on my last slide, and I am excited to start using this data tracking progress notebook with my students this school year.